But our special focus this afternoon is on a judgment that the entire nation is waiting for, indeed an entire subcontinent, because 11-judge bench of the International Court of Justice will soon deliver its verdict in the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. Pakistan's conviction of Jadhav and his consequent death sentence on charges of espionage have been challenged by India at the International Court of Justice. India has accused Pakistan of violating the Vienna Convention by denying consular access to Jadhav, accused Pakistan of conducting a fast trial and even forcing a false confession from Jadhav on tape. Pakistan's argument is that Jadhav was involved in terror activities and that domestic law in Pakistan has allowed him to go through a full and fair trial. So two countries and two very different views on the issue. In about a half an hour from now at The Hague, the International Court of Justice will give its verdict. Remember the big demands. Demand number 1, suspend the Jadhav sentence. Demand number 2, annulment of the trial in the Pakistani court. And demand number 3, a proper legal aid for Jadhav and provisional measures until the verdict. I want to go to our correspondent Gaurav Sawant, who's joining me from The Hague at this moment. Gaurav, about a half an hour from now, we expect that verdict to come out. Give us a sense of what is happening where you are. I'm told that the Indian secretary in charge of the Pakistan desk, Deepak Mittal, is there. Has Harish Salve also arrived, and is India fully represented therefore by both diplomats and lawyers as we await this verdict?
Rajdeep, just a few moments ago, the Indian delegation went inside the Peace Palace here at the International Court of Justice. Deepak Mittal, Joint Secretary, Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran, spearheading India's team. There's also Mr. V.D. Sharma, Joint Secretary in the External Affairs Ministry, and Kajal Bhatt, First Secretary Legal. So that's the Indian delegation here. Harish Salve is engaged elsewhere, so he's not here today. In a while, the Pakistani delegation will also be going in. It's the same. Khawar Qureshi, Barrister Khawar Qureshi leads the Pakistani delegation. They have two of their officials also here. In 20 minutes, the verdict will be out, Rajdeep. Judge Ronnie Abraham, he will read out the verdict. 11 judges. We still have to see what that verdict is. And we were speaking to the legal fraternity here, whether it's a consensus judgment, whether it's a majority judgment. So the effort is to have all the judges on the same plane and a consensus judgment. If not, then it's a majority verdict. And here, Rajdeep, the main plea at this point of time is step 1, urge Pakistan that Kulbhushan Jadhav should not be hanged. The death sentence should not be carried out. He should not be executed. Step 2 is get India consular access. And step 3, Rajdeep, would be to get this trial annulled so that he can come back home. So it's a long-drawn process. It's a difficult process, but it's going step by step. And India hopes at least step 1 would be successful today.
That's right. Step 1, importantly, is to get consular access and get a suspension of the sentence. I'm joined by former DGMO, Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia joins me. Also joining me, Kapil Sankha, senior lawyer at the courts here. I'm joined by Akar Patel, Executive Director at Amnesty, and our correspondent in Pakistan, Hamza, is also with us. But Akar, purely from a human rights point of view, I presume that all human rights organizations at the very least are asking that consular access be granted and that a summary trial that is conducted in just 4 days cannot be seen as evidence of a free and fair trial.
We'd have two specific demands. The first is that the death penalty not be applied in this case as we do in all cases. More specifically in this case, we believe that they should have been tried in a civilian court. We don't believe that trials of this nature that lie outside of military discipline, such as soldiers going AWOL and so on, should actually be tried in martial courts.
So that's the very basic demand. General, do you agree that at the very least, a military court of the kind that Pakistan has subjected Jadhav to is prima facie seen as something that denies an individual his or her basic rights? And that basic, the basic structure of these courts is such that they are in violation of international human rights. So the least that you would expect is that the court today to say that consular access should be granted and the suspension to be stayed.
The whole thing, the whole episode has been scripted and orchestrated with the Pakistani army. From the kidnapping to the trials to the so-called confession to the verdict. And Pakistani army, unfortunately, has very little time for legalities and legal compulsions. Also diplomatic norms and niceties and even conventions. To expect that from the Pakistani army, I think would have been a
So you believe this has been orchestrated, scripted by the Pakistani army. Hamza, what is the mood in Pakistan as far as this verdict is concerned? There's a lot of anticipation here in India, but in Pakistan on the other hand, is there a sense at all in the newspapers there that Pakistan in this instance may have bitten more than they can chew? Have they been taken by surprise by the fact that India has gone to the International Court of Justice?
Well, Rajdeep, the only surprise Pakistan was hit with was that they actually was criticizing the fact that the International Court of Justice was very quick to take up the case, and then also very quick to actually give time, very less time to Pakistan to actually formulate their response to India's contention. And now, when the verdict is coming out, Pakistan is confident on the fact that the case will be dismissed as Pakistan's desire, because as per their understanding, as per government sources, that the declaration of March 2017 actually justifies the fact that ICJ cannot question Pakistan on issues related to terrorism and national interest. And this is what Pakistan is actually umbrelling this case of Jadhav as well. So Pakistan is positive on this side that ICJ is going to be annulling the case, dismissing the case on the basis that they do not have the jurisdiction to question Pakistan on cases of national interest.
Effectively, Kapil Sangha, purely in legal terms, it seems to boil down to a 2008 bilateral treaty between India and Pakistan, which made it very clear that cases involving national security will not be subject to international law like the Vienna Convention. On the other hand, the Vienna Convention is very clear in itself that Kulbhushan Jadhav should be given consular access.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it appears, am I right, that the ICJ is looking also at the issue of jurisdiction. Do they have the jurisdiction to decide a case which Pakistan claims is subject to the 2008 bilateral treaty, or is this case subject to Vienna Convention and therefore needs an intervention urgent because there's a death sentence here from the ICJ?
So I think the issue pertaining to the urgency has taken precedence over the preliminary issue of jurisdiction. The question of jurisdiction has not been put forth by the judges at the ICJ right now. What they would probably be deciding on is on the question of urgency, and probably would provide an interim stay, so to say, at this moment.
That's what India would want. An interim
exactly
stay,
what India
a suspension of the sentence for now, and granting of consular access would be 2 steps forward.
Yes, absolutely. And going forward, there's another very important issue, that as far as the preliminary issue is concerned, even the Pakistan Council has not made it into a preliminary issue and said that the court has to first decide on it. It has merely stated that this court does not have the powers in terms of the bilateral treaty and left it to that. So the courts, as far as I understand, should be deciding on the aspect of the urgency first, and then keep the question of the preliminary issue of jurisprudence as a secondary point to be considered.
Karuna Nandi, lawyer, also joining me. Karuna, is the sense that you get that this is about individual rights and freedoms guaranteed under the law, under international law? The Vienna Convention surely must get supremacy over a bilateral agreement where definitions of what is national security, because that is how the 2008 agreement is defined. India and Pakistan will not accept international conventions when it comes to matters of national security. So Pakistan will first presumably have to prove its case that Kulbhushan Jadhav was indeed a spy and was involved in terror activity, evidence of which has not been put in the public domain. Your sense, what is the core of the battle in The Hague today?
I think the battle in The Hague is under Article 74, which means that the list, which is the subject of the dispute, is something that should be preserved until the dispute is decided, right? Now, that to me seems not necessarily such a difficult decision, because, of course, if Kulbhushan Jadhav is executed, and in my view, absolutely wrongfully, then, then there's nothing left to decide. Now, Pakistan did, as you were saying, Rajdeep, Pakistan did put in a declaration on the 29th of March, limiting to the jurisdiction of the court. And two of the points you raised are something that they have raised, that Maliha Lodi, when she put it in, Pakistan did raise these 2 points, right? Like, essentially, they are saying that disputes that are already, that fall within the domestic jurisdiction of the Republic of Pakistan, and of course, consular, access is not one of them. Disputes that pertain to national security, as you mentioned, etc. I think it's also important to remember that, and I think this is the mistake that I'm sure your channel will not, but a lot of the media is making a mistake in looking at Pakistan as a monolith at this point. And if you look, for example, at the fact that the military is speaking in a particular manner, and also the military court in this case was such an absolute kangaroo court, right? Not only did they deny consular access, they denied any lawyers to this gentleman. They admitted confessions in this sort of very coerced sort of situation. There was no transparency whatsoever. And so it's absolutely a kangaroo court. But perhaps the Nawaz Sharif government, in also invoking this Vienna Convention, when you look at their dispute with Afghanistan, their recent dispute with Afghanistan, when you look at the fact that they have in fact appeared before the ICJ and they've made their arguments, when you look at this declaration, it's not a blanket declaration.
But can I hold you on the fact? Can I hold you on the fact that it's very interesting?
That they want to sort of step up and look at.
It's very interesting that you're saying this on a day when Pakistan, in fact, has attempted to invoke the Vienna Convention in a case involving 2 Pakistanis who have been caught in Afghanistan. And Pakistan now wants them to get all the protection that they deserve under the Vienna Convention. So clearly, this at one level will expose a certain duplicity and the fear in the subcontinent that Pakistan has been exporting terror. And this is a fear in Afghanistan, this is a fear in this country, and indeed in several other parts of the region. Majid Memon, senior lawyer, is joining me. Majid Memon, purely from a criminal law standpoint, I presume that you would expect a trial in a case like this to be more than just 4 days. Within 4 days of the trial starting, when the death sentence is given, the presumption, prima facie, will be that this was a case where a due process of law was not followed. Natural justice was not given to Kulbhushan Jadhav, who's been denied even consular access. To that extent, do you believe, as we head towards the judgment, India's case is a strong one?
Now, see, Rajdeep, even in the international court, the arguments, the sum and substance of the arguments on behalf of Pakistan are that they are trying to contend that since Jadhav was a spy, the spy is not entitled to consular access, and therefore there is no violation of Vienna Convention. This is number one argument. Number two, their argument is that a spy who is tried through the martial court martial is not entitled to the copies of judgment, copies of charge sheet and the evidence and the facility of defense lawyer. Now I am asking a question to Pakistan on this particular point. Now this man is a spy is what you have prejudged. The whole problem is that whether this man is a spy or not is the question. Unless it is decided, unless there is
but is the Supreme Court deciding on the is the Supreme Court deciding on
that this man is involved in espionage?
No, but Mr. Memon, is it very clear? The ICJ is not deciding at the moment whether Kulbhushan Jadhav is a spy or not. They are deciding on presumably issues of whether due process has been followed in the case, and therefore whether a temporary stay should be granted on the sentence and consular access as per Vienna Convention should be given. The question of whether he's a spy or not will have to be put in a public domain at a particular time, presumably by the Pakistani authorities.
But please let me make Rajdeep, let me make myself clear.
Yes.
The argument of the Pakistan before the court is that since he is a spy, he has not been given all these facilities, and therefore we have not violated any law. This is an argument which is totally devoid of merits. This argument is without substance. This argument is totally violative of principles, basic principles of equity, fair play and natural justice. You can't just say that a man is, according to us, is a spy, therefore no facilities can be given, no Vienna Convention, no human right, nothing applies. Now, we could have done this in the case of Ajmal Kasab. We caught him red-handed in an act of terror. Ask Pakistani authorities that please compare the case of Kulbhushan with Ajmal Kasab. Ajmal Kasab was caught red-handed in an act of terror. Such act of terror which was universally condemned. And yet, we asked him to have his lawyer.
That's
Pakistan
precisely my point. We gave Ajmal Kasab.
We provided him legal aid.
That's right.
No.
That's precisely the point, Majid Mehman, that Ajmal Kasab was given every possible aid, which was denied in a way to Kulbhushan Jadhav. Akar Patel.
Absolutely.
Akar Patel, should we be drawing those distinctions? Should you, as the Executive Director of Amnesty International, do you believe the time has come that these provisions under the 2008 Act between the, or bilateral agreement between the two countries, which say that in cases of national security, international conventions will not apply? Is that the thin end of the wedge that can lead to human rights abuses?
It would be absolutely disastrous if we, as a constitutional republic, were to accept that. I think every individual has the right to a free and a fair and an open trial, which was denied to Mr. Jadhav. It should not have been. In the case of Kasab, I think that he was given a fair trial. I think he should not have been given the death sentence. We stand opposed to the death penalty, no matter how grievous, how heinous the crime may be, whether it is rape or murder or a terrorism. But for India to assume a position that the conventions that it has stood by all these decades should be discarded because of fear of terrorism, I think would be a total mistake. We should stand by open, free courts and a justice system in which every individual has the right to a free and fair trial.
In your view, when I look at the Kasab case and then compare it with what has happened in Jadhav, you believe that the time has come that in all such cases, at the very least, the due process of law be followed, principles of natural justice be followed, that we don't reduce our courts to kangaroo courts?
Unfortunately, Mr. Sardesai, we have done that in our own country as well. If you are a victim of AFSPA in the northeast or in Jammu and Kashmir, you cannot depend on a civilian justice. We have an equally opaque, equally closed system for those soldiers of our army who stand accused of murder or of torture. I think it's very good that we have gone into this case with the demand that Mr. Jadhav be given a civilian trial, but I think these are standards we should follow at home as well.
Interesting, because I saw General Bhatia aggressively shaking his head, worried about what you just said, but you put the cat among the pigeons, because in a sense, what Akar Patel of the Amnesty is saying, that even in India, you need to follow certain basic principles of natural justice, and laws like the Armed Forces Special Powers Act don't do that. So are we entering that phase where internationally we must accept that even in a case of a terrorist, even in a case of a spy, certain laws have to be followed?
I think that's his viewpoint. It is definitely not correct. In Kasab's case, the trial continued 4 years.
Yes.
So let's get the facts right.
But do you believe under AFSPA, an individual arrested under AFSPA gets the full rights of natural justice?
Absolutely. The army does not try anyone under AFSPA. AFSPA is the protection given to the army. It is not for any terrorist or this thing. He is tried with the civil under the civil CRPC and the CPC. He is not tried with army at all. There are no army courts which have jurisdiction over non-army personnel in India. So that is an incorrect statement altogether. So what I'm trying to say is the issue is right now, the whole thing.
No, because the issue is Pakistan set up these military courts, presumably claiming that they were fighting terrorists.
Right.
They have then used that military court operation to try an Indian citizen, whom they now allege is first alleged there is a spy. Now they say he was involved in terror activities. Do not give him the basic protection he deserves under the Vienna Convention, and then put their hands up and say this is under national security as per the 2008 agreement. I'm just wondering whether Pakistan is simply using these military courts now to send out a message. And that's my fear. One thing is to take it on the Taliban and terrorists, those who are involved in terror, and the other is to say there must be a universal application of human rights in all such cases.
After the National Action Plan for Pakistan, which they put into place for anti-terrorist operations, they have set up military courts to try out all terrorists. And they are treating Jadhav, and like I said, they have scripted the whole thing from his kidnapping.
So you're convinced it's an entirely scripted operation?
And there are reasons to it.
We will come to those reasons in a moment. Why is Pakistan, as General Bhatia says, is scripting this entire story of Kulbhushan Jadhav? And can really Pakistan prove in a court of law that he was indeed a spy involved in terror activities? Remember, the International Court of Justice expected to deliver a judgment in about 10 minutes from now. All eyes on the Peace Palace at The Hague.